Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The neighborhood was burning hot, angry and crazy. Everyone was hanging out of their windows, Marquette Fry would later recall. No one had air conditioning and everyone had attitude. 21 years old, the Los Angeles resident was out on the streets celebrating the end of his 2-year parole for robbery. Together with his brother, Ronnie, Fire had a few cold beers and then cruised the streets in their mother's 10-year-old Buick. Then, as Fire drunkenly weaved his way down Avalon Boulevard, he saw the red flashing lights of a police car behind him. Fire played the clown as he went through an impromptu sobriety test, shucking and jiving for his friends on the streets, the arresting officer recorded. Then the shucking and jiving turned into pushing and shoving. The police hit Fire with a baton and one officer drew a shotgun. Fire's mother, Rena, tried to intervene and was handcuffed. As the police drove away with the young man amid a shower of bottles, white drivers began to be stopped and beaten. The barbershop across the road and the liquor store were looted and then went up in flames. Last week, the world watched aghast as police armed with tasers and tear gas masks, and in one case backed up by snipers, arrested hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters at universities across the United States. The economic historian Caroline Folin was violently attacked by police after she tried to step in and protect one of the students and was then charged with assault. The eminent philosopher Noel McAfee, the author of a well-regarded book that considers the social and political consequences of the unhealed trauma of 9/11 on American public life, also ended up in prison. The display of armed force, which took place even though authorities admitted the protests were peaceful and the demonstrators did not resist arrest, has provided disturbing evidence of what happens when police forces become militarized, treating legitimate protests in the way armies treat insurgencies. Ever since the rebellion sparked off by Fire's arrest in 1965, police forces across America have increasingly modeled themselves on the army, with some, law scholar Anta Ploden records, even acquiring equipment like mine-resistant trucks and armored assault vehicles to protect quiet suburban streets. According to Ploden, from 1997 to 2020, police forces received some $5.1 billion in military material from the Department of Defense. The images of armored personnel carriers confronting demonstrators at Ferguson, where violence broke out in 2014 after the killing of Black American youth Michael Brown, led President Barack Obama to end these transfers. But President Donald Trump resumed the program. For many Americans, the police's treatment of students and academics likely seemed extraordinarily gentle. Figures put together by the Washington Post show that more than 1,000 people are killed by America's police annually. That's a number 5 times higher than in conflict-torn India, which has 3 times America's population, and 15 times higher than European countries in population-adjusted terms. Although half of the people shot and killed by police are white, Black Americans are killed at a hugely disproportionate rate. There is no evident relationship, the statistician Cody Ross has shown, between crime rates in a particular area and the use of lethal force by police over there. The militarization of police, the work of economist Federico Macera shows, hasn't made police officers safer either. While violent crime rates have been falling for years, they continue to rise in some urban centers like Memphis, Dallas, and Washington, D.C., especially in low-income areas. Following the violence in Watts, a young black resident contrasted his life with the conditions in affluent central and western Los Angeles. "You've conquered it, baby, you've got it made. Some nights on the roof of our rotten, falling down buildings, we can actually see your lights shining in the distance. So near and yet so far. We want to reach out and grab it and punch it on the nose." American policing has focused on hitting back, but not on actually dealing with the issue. Like in many new nations, journalist Radley Balco has written, American police in the 18th and 19th century was an informal affair. Local sheriffs and volunteer militia enforced order when it was needed, fought Native Americans, and hunted down runaway slaves. From the mid-1800s, though, police forces began to form in the great industrial cities of the Northeast. These forces went to some lengths to distinguish themselves from the conventional military. Their duties stretched to community work like running soup kitchens. Through the 19th and early 20th century, the military often found itself engaged in the brutal job of restoring order, especially after violent racial conflicts. The so-called race riot, almost always involving white mobs that attacked and killed blacks, became a recurrent feature of American life after the War of 1914-1918, historian Edgar Schuller has noted. Large-scale military deployments were also used to crush working-class protests that broke out during the Great Depression. Major George Patton, who would later acquire global fame as a general leading the fight against Nazi Germany, was once charged with dispersing tens of thousands of marchers seeking bonuses for their military services in the First World War. Even though Patton succeeded in dispersing the marchers without using bullets, he later gave his advice to trainee officers. I quote, "If it is necessary to use machine guns, aim at their feet. If you must fire, do a good job. A few casualties become martyrs, a large number becomes an object lesson." Following the violence in Watts, which left 34 people dead and over 1,000 injured, some 14,000 troops had to be called in to restore order. According to Balco, the Los Angeles police's point man for these riots, Inspector Darrell Gates, observed that rather than a single mob, we had people attacking us from all directions. We were constantly ducking bottles, rocks, knives, and Molotov cocktails, he added. Guns were pointed out of a second-story window and random shots fired. To Gates, who later became chief of police in Los Angeles, it seemed like guerrilla war, not a normal urban riot. And he turned to the United States Army, then fighting insurgents in Vietnam, for lessons. The heavily armed Special Weapons and Tactics Unit, the high-velocity rifle, and the grenade launcher became a part of the arsenal of American policing. Even though the first SWAT operation, a 1969 raid against the radical Black Panthers, which saw its activists and police trade 5,000 rounds in 3 hours in a crowded neighborhood, miraculously only injuring 6 people, was botched. The idea of policing as a kind of counterinsurgency entrenched itself. The murderous rampage of Charles Whitman at the University of Texas in Austin, which claimed 14 lives including himself in 1966, seemed to add to the case for stronger police weaponry. And the war on drugs, which began in 1971, extended the acquisition of military tactics to forces across the United States. The passage of the Military Cooperation with Law Enforcement Act in 1981, notes Plowden, saw the military and police force conduct joint paramilitary operations using U-2 spy planes to search for marijuana farms before launching raids using tactics designed for the killing fields of Kampuchea or Vietnam. The strategy was profoundly counterproductive as criminals responded by expanding their own arsenals and acquiring increasingly lethal weaponry. Like soldiers, Plowden argues, police came to see the communities they served as battlefields where, and I quote, "everyone is a suspect and just about anyone can kill you within a moment's notice." From the murderous siege of a cult in Waco, Texas, to children and bystanders being killed in counter-narcotics raids, the impact of this new doctrine manifested itself through the coming decades. The sociologist Julian Go has suggested that American police forces began treating troubled inner city areas like internal colonies, metropolitan spaces with large or rising numbers of minorities who are racialized as inferior, denied equal treatment, and appear to pose threats to the dominant order. As Plowden has noted, there should be no reason that American police kill more civilians in 1 month than an entire country, the United Kingdom, has done in 100 years. The result is a country fractured in its attitudes to the police, a white America and a black America. For India, the lessons are important. Ever since 2611, Indian police forces have also become increasingly seduced by militarist models, a phenomenon then until only seen in insurgency-torn regions of Punjab and Kashmir. Though there can be no serious debate that police can and must be equipped to engage in special missions, Brigadier M.S. Khara has argued the expanding counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism missions have degraded the ability of police forces to carry out their normal functions within a structured legal framework. Like in America, that has meant the police has become increasingly alienated from the community, something which will ultimately corrode the legitimacy of the entire criminal justice system and possibly even the nation state itself. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor at ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.